Hello. Uh, Today we're going to look at how to write a flowchart proof. First, we're going to look at the basic structure of a flowchart proof. Now, say we're given some AC is congruent to DF and so on and so on. We want to prove that the two triangles are congruent. Um, Now, we're not going to deal with this in this problem, but we'll eventually get there. There are three parts that are needed in order to prove that two triangles are congruent. And so once we have the three parts, then then underneath we put a reason for each of those. And then once we know these three things are true, these three things can prove that the triangles are congruent. And then you say why underneath. For instance, if I looked at this one's pretty basic. They give you all of the information. All of these are put into the statements. All of these prove that these triangles are congruent. Now underneath, we need reasons for it. This first one's pretty basic. We give you all the information. But then over here, the reason why these are congruent triangles is because of side angle side. So we write side angle side beneath there. Now this one we'll use when we're proving something else afterwards. And what we need is this thing called corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. That's, for short, we write CPCTC. Now what that means is that if two triangles are congruent, then everything about them has to be congruent, meaning the angles and the sides. And for corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent, we know if triangle ABC is congruent to DEF, we know all of the things that are going to be congruent in there. We know that angle A and angle D are going to be congruent because they're in that position. B and E are going to be congruent, and C and F. Likewise, the segments AB and DE, BC and EF, and AC and DF. So we know that. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the same example as we had earlier, and now we're going to use CPCTC. In your packet, if you don't want to write the whole thing out, I get it. We're just adding on to your previous one. So we're going to do everything the same, but now once we have this, since B and E are the middle letter in both these triangles, we know that angle B has to be congruent to angle E by CPCTC. So everything is the same. We're just proving that angle B and angle E are congruent by CPCTC. All right. Now, when we want to add more to the chart, we said that there is three boxes for congruence. Now, we're not always given something that's going to be a congruency. So if I have ST bisects MA, I can write that out here. ST bisects MA. And that's given. Now if I know ST bisects MA, what do I know because of it? Well, I know MS has to be congruent to SA. All right, that's good. And then we also know, oh, and the reason, that's definition of bisect. Definition of bisect. Now we know MT is going to be congruent to AT. MT is congruent to AT, and that reason is just given. Now finally, we need something else. What on this side is going to be congruent to this side? Well, I know TS is congruent to TS because that's it's the same segment. So you can write same segment or you can write reflexive property. Whatever you prefer. All right, now we have our three pieces of information. And our three pieces of information tell us that triangle MTS is going to be congruent to triangle ATS. And the reason is we have side, side, side. All right. Now that's not what we wanted. We wanted to find out that the angles are congruent. So MTS, this one, is this congruent to ATS? Well, the T's match up in both triangles. So I can say angle MTS is congruent to angle ATS. And that reasoning is corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. All right. Hopefully that gives you a start on how to write a flowchart proof, and you can work your way through your homework.